Good. Kurt Vonnegut Jr. once wrote, "We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be." I've always liked this quote, "We are what we pretend to be." I've thought about it many times during my life, often when I find myself in new surroundings or doing things I've never done before. Last July, I was asked to lead a COVID-19 information and service center. I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea what the work would entail. I knew nothing. Actually, that's not true. I knew two things. First, I had to say yes, right? Because this was an amazing opportunity to be of service during a pandemic. And two, I also know for certain I knew nothing about COVID testing, or anything pandemic related. At that time, Diane Walker was the only other member of the team, and we embarked on a journey to create the first, and hopefully last, University of Vermont's COVID-19 Information and Service Center. In the early days of forming the center, I remember thinking often of the Vonnegut quote, "We are what we pretend to be." So I did my best to pretend to be the leader of a COVID testing center. I had to pretend because I had no reference point. Nothing like this had ever existed. Others were looking for me for guidance, so pretend I did. I remember in the early recruitment phone calls when I was hiring the initial core team, Whitney, Jillian, Nathan, Betty, Julia. During these calls, I made it clear that we would be conducting COVID tests, we would be answering emails related to COVID and phone calls related to testing and quarantine. But beyond that, I wasn't actually 100% sure what the work would entail. And I explained that these were temporary positions, and I had no idea when they might end. Gonna maybe Christmas, maybe October, maybe sooner. No one knew if this was going to work. Could UVM open up? Schools all over the country were remaining closed or opening up and suddenly shutting down. However, despite the unknowns, I was confident that whatever we did, we would give it all we had. I remember asking during these early phone calls, this was my sales pitch. Think about it. At the end of the pandemic, what do you rather have on your resume? That you binged watched Tiger King, or that you were a member of the COVID-19 Information and Service Center? Okay, so as a reminder, this was in July, right? And I had already successfully binge watched all of Tiger King. And having accomplished that COVID milestone, I, for one, was ready to begin interacting with normal people. So, for some strange reason, Whitney, Jillian, Nathan, Betty, and Julia all agreed to break quarantine and join the team. In time, we added students, volunteers, shift leads, and the support of colleagues all across campus. As for COVID testing, one of the greatest strengths was our lack of knowledge. Some might even say that ignorance was our superpower. I was leading a testing center, and I had never had a COVID test. I never saw a COVID test, and I had no medical experience whatsoever. Therefore, my thought process was unencumbered by existing notions of what this should look like. As a result, I always assumed that testing could be fast, safe, accurate, efficient, and fun. And accomplish this we did, but not without the single most important element of the center, you, the students. From day one, students stepped up and asked to volunteer in the center. Nursing students provided their time as part of their academic pursuits. And then the hiring began. And continued, and continued, and continued, until our staff was over 60 students and volunteers. Today, a single week takes an average of 1,500 staffing hours, 1,500 staffing hours every week. And keeping all this organized has been the challenge of Whitney. A challenge most similar to herding cats, like 500 cats. But Whitney has excelled in this role, adapting technologies and improving processes all throughout the past 9 months. Over the past year, we've been faced with many challenges, and each time the team has stepped up and gone above and beyond, and demonstrated to the UVM community that we are UVM strong. You can clap now. Today, the center functions like a finely engineered machine, from setup to testing 600 people plus an hour to break down every single day, 5 days a week, nonstop. All the moving parts function seamlessly. However, everybody knows that machines just don't work on their own. They need an operator. They need someone to control all the moving parts, to flick the switches. And since day one, Jillian has been one of our core operators. Jillian can often be found on T1, but she operates more like a T1000 from T2. She can often be found on T2, but she operates more like a T1000 from T2. That's T2 Terminator 2. Okay? The movie. According to T2, according to the movie T2, not the position T2, the T1000 was made of a liquid metal more advanced than the T800 Terminator. The T1000 was comprised entirely of a mimic polyalloy, rendering it capable of shape-shifting, near-perfect mimicry, and recovery from damage. I think this describes Jillian perfectly. Not only can she mimic any role in the testing center, she's constantly shape-shifting to address the task at hand, and we all know Jillian is unstoppable. Just like the T1000, unstoppable. Well, except of course, the T1000 actually was stopped by molten steel, in which extreme heat nearly rapidly decimated the T1000 molecular structure as it desperately tried to adapt to a deadly 1,600 degrees Celsius environment. However, at the University of Vermont, our students are kind and compassionate. And they hold the door open in the testing center for everyone, thus ensuring that the temperature at the T2 position rarely, and the check-in positions, rarely exceeds 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So Jillian did not freeze, Jillian did not melt, and neither did you. We made it here today. UVM made it here today because of what we did. You are a part of something very special. Hold on to these memories. Because long after the feel of a cotton swab in your nasal cavity has faded, you will remember the fun moments, the diversity of music, the cute dogs, the single, and the double bloody noses. When you least expect it, these images will flood your mind and remind you of your role during a pandemic that defined a generation. So in closing, you will get swabs mixed up, of course, as you probably already know. You'll get mixed up with split and unsplit swabs. Sure, when you step 6 feet in between, step with care and great tact. And remember, co-verified must be green. Just never forget to check your name and date of birth, and never mix up your COVID test results with your self-worth. And you will succeed, yes, you will indeed. 98 3/4 students tested every 9 minutes, % guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains of test tubes and swabs. So be your name Abe, Anthony, Alexis, or Avery, or Carrie, Katie, Caroline, Claire, or Alyssa. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain of pandemic testing supplies is waiting, so get on your way. That's the end.